Welcome back to the Columbus, Ohio Real Estate Market Update. I'm Ryan Dieter with Key Realty. In today's video, we dive into the May of 2025 numbers as they're out. We're sitting here towards the end of June, as we always do, a month out of the numbers coming out. But last month, I made a pretty bold prediction, and I mentioned that we saw such modest growth that I don't know if we will see appreciation in the next few months. We may see some depreciation happening. And we have the numbers in. We'll see if that came true this month or if I was wrong for once. And you'll have to tune in to find out. So let's dive into it. All right, as you can see here, I got the month of August data pulled up for us. The Columbus, Ohio board puts out for us. Again, we're sitting here towards the middle of September as I record this. And we're always looking at a month and passes. It takes a few weeks to produce this data once the month's over and the board share it with us. So it's always a couple weeks behind, which is a good indicator of where the market was. One thing I like to focus on when I think about where the market currently is, because it can change in a couple weeks. We see that pretty consistently in Columbus, where a market does change within a couple weeks, depending on the spring market into summer and then summer market into fall. We do see things shift very quickly, and that's where we want to focus on what hits the market and how long does it take to go off market, how long does it take to be contingent or pending to get an offer. We see that start to slow down, especially this time of year. And we'll show you that. But let's dive into some of the just big picture stuff here. As we see, sales are up a tad. We're seeing sales up 3%, which is not a drastic thing. And I keep saying over and over again that the amount of closed sales really doesn't matter to the individual. It just really matters to the profession where hey, the more homes that are selling, more transactions are taking place, more people are getting paid throughout the industry. But it also has a little bit of effect on supply and demand. But overall, it's not really a statistic that most consumers really care about. In contracts, one I really focus on is, okay, are in contracts going up or down? Are people, seeing more home seller, more buyers out there buying houses or less? But at the end of the day, we really want to focus on our prices going up or down. And we see that prices are steadily, very comfortably on the rise. It's more a healthy rise, what we saw in the last handful of years, where we saw double-digit numbers. This is a very healthy, steady rise for a housing market. When it has too large of an increase, what that does is it really prices out those buyers that are first-time buyers that are in this market that are making the average incomes to buy those first-time home prices. It gets them left behind where they can't keep up. And really the only people that are then able to buy are people coming from more expensive markets into this market. And so this, 4 to 5, 3 to 5%, it's a very healthy market when we see increases. And I look at these numbers holistically, average, median, and average price per square foot. We're seeing this is a stronger month than it has been on the average through year to date. So we're seeing a pretty strong month really for those when it comes to this year compared to the rest of the year. And so this is where I kind of let off with where we're seeing, kind of jumping down here towards the end real quick as I, tease that inventory continues rising and 21% increase this month, rise in inventory, which means that we're seeing more homes sit on the market and be on the market, but yet we're still seeing prices rise. One, because inventory, was, over the last 5 years was drastically low. We had that's what, really drove up, the perfect storm during the COVID years of super low inventory and then also super high demand. So now we have more of an average demand and we're starting to get back to a more comfortable average supply as well. But what we're seeing are homes hitting the market and they are sitting longer. The data shows that as well. So now we're seeing days on market also creep up quite a bit this month. And we're seeing, homes just sit longer before they sell. But what I'm seeing is like sellers are baking that in. Sellers are understanding this now. They're starting to grapple with that over the last year or so that homes aren't selling in 3 days. They may take a month or even 3 months now, but sellers are baking in that into their pricing. They're pricing it to where, okay, if I don't get an offer right away, I may, have some wiggle room to come down and still sell for a fair amount, what they feel is fair, and even higher than average compared to last year at a 4 or 5% appreciation rate. And so we're seeing sellers just bake that in. Sellers are pricing it maybe 10% higher than what sold last year, and they're getting 5%, maybe 3%. And and what we're really seeing drive the market right now, and I always say there's really 3 factors of what buyers consider value. And we think about home values when it comes to real estate. The 3 main factors I always kind of harp on are obviously location. Everyone knows location, location, location. The other one is condition. just because, to have the same, you may have the same location, but one condition is going to be, maybe way better than the other one. Obviously, the one with the better condition is going to sell for more. And the last one in Columbus, especially, and this is nationally true as well, but Columbus really has a seasonal market. And if you don't understand the seasonal market, that can really drastically change prices as well. Let me show you the graph that I love this graph to show you and it indicates the seasonality of Columbus, especially these last few years, just getting more and more drastic. As we see, the spring has, I always say it's 200% of the appreciation happens in spring. It goes down 100%, and we're left with 100% after that at the end of the year, based on, the spring market jumps up and then fall through winter really levels off. And so that's what we see. Those are the three factors. So location, condition, and market timing makes a huge difference on quote unquote value or what price you may get for your home. And so when you're thinking about listing a house, you got to be cautious of listing a house in October like it's April, and focus on, maybe you're comparing it to other houses in, February or even January of last year. But there's still it's still helpful to think about. And then something to consider too is that, appraisal issues take place when you price your house too much and there's no data to show that, hey, this house is worth this. That there's sometimes appraisal issues when we don't have the multiple offers driving that up, and people, giving appraisal gaps anymore like we used to. And we see that still in the spring, but we don't see that in the fall. And so those houses that are priced higher than anything that we've seen on the market in that area sometimes sit longer, and that's what we're seeing. But those prices seem to be baked in, is what I'm noticing in this market. And so, that's where I'm seeing there's opportunity, and there's also, getting back to what I would consider a more balanced market here in Columbus. It's kind of a confusing market because we've had, a seller's market for almost 10 years. And before that, we had a drastic buyer's market. So, we talked about the crash of 2008 being this drastic buyer's market. And then all of a sudden, sneakily, we've had this seller's market for a long time. Then we had a super seller's market during COVID. And so now we're seeing it get more balanced. And when we see more balance, we're seeing these buyers try to take advantage of this balanced market. And I've seen some buyers miss out because of that. They've come in super low, and all of a sudden, the agent's able to say, hey, we have a really low offer. Is anyone else interested in buying this? They come in, they have a couple other buyers maybe come in higher. And we're still seeing multiple offers take place, even sometimes a couple weeks after the house has been on the market, 2, 3, 4 weeks, with nothing. And all of a sudden now you get, these buyers bidding against each other with low offers instead of over asking and high offers. So it's kind of a wild market out there, but it is also, seeing more normalization. And I think that a lot of people are just trying to take advantage of, hey, it's no longer a super seller's market. We can come in super low, but then, sellers are also more patient. We're seeing a lot of, the reason why we're not seeing a drastic crash in the market right now, or prices come under when we see an inventory rise this much and this quick, is that, sellers are able to be patient. They have a lot of equity in the market right now, and people are understanding that they don't want to give away the house. And so we're seeing sellers kind of hold tight a little bit more and not be make drastic moves either, which is helping keep those prices on the rise. So anyway, so we're seeing again, we're not seeing a drastic new listings. What we're seeing is listings hit the market, and we're still seeing inventory continue to rise. I don't see, we're eventually what we see is when prices start coming down like this. We saw this last year, is when prices, sellers start to realize, okay, pricing is coming down. It's not the best time to sell. So what we do, we'll wait. We'll inventory. We'll see less new listings than we've seen. See last month we had new listings, 7% of new listings. And we're starting to see a slowdown in the new listings amount. So what we see is those houses that have been sitting start exiting the market as well. We see new listings start slowing down. And so this is compared to last year. Obviously, we have 3% higher, but it's a slower rate than we saw last month. And we start seeing sellers hold off on listing until spring, until they know that there's more buyers out there. And what we see, obviously, in the spring, the reason the spring market, I have a whole video on this if you really want to dive into why the spring market in Columbus is so competitive and why prices continue to rise, so drastically in the spring. But there's just more buyers out there. It's supply and demand. There's more buyers in the market. What I tell people is the fall market into the winter market are the right house, right price buyers. They've been looking for a while maybe, and they know the market well. They're not gonna quote unquote overpay for a house just because it's listed. They want the house at the right price, and it's got to be the right house for them. And so that's why we're seeing condition. Condition is really driving this market, and that's normal. conditions should drive this market. We're seeing costs of construction be way up, so buyers are really cautious of purchasing a house that needs a lot of work or updates. And if they do need a lot of updates, they want a deal. They want to get it to where they can, budget that in and have room to fix it up and make it worth their time or energy to have to do the projects that they, would rather not do. And so, anyways, we're seeing all that. And then one thing that happened this week as well, we did see record low, or sorry, 3-year low mortgage rates hit too, which is going to help potentially spruce or spruce buyers or convince buyers to get back into the market. And so we saw these numbers trickle down, but we saw this a couple times this last handful of years. What we've been seeing as rates have been in the sixes to sevens range, we see it get down to close to six, thinking, okay, now we're going to get down to the below fives. It's happening. It's starting to happen. Prices, rates are coming down. And then we see it go right back up to the mid sixes. And so we saw that happen again. Will it happen? We saw it spike down to close to 6% and then come right back up to 6.35, which is where we kind of leveled off after a couple of days of coming down. There's a lot of factors to this. Again, the Fed just announced some rate cuts. They have that baked in typically. What I tell reminding people that the mortgage rates and the Federal Reserve price interest rates are not connected, and that's not what they base it on. But there is an influence in that, and we see that those cuts were already baked in well before the announcement was made. And so that's why you got to kind of be ahead of it. When you hear that these, they're planning on announcing rate cuts, typically it's better to do something prior to the announcement than after, typically, because the mortgage industry bakes the cuts in, and then based on what the news is released, they kind of, conservatively will adjust to that. So, we did see it go down a little bit, but it's sitting at that mid, 6.35 right now today. And what I would tell you is we did see some spike in buyer applications. Will that make a drastic change in the market? I think the life change and then the timing is more important. Like this chart here is going to be more important to when we see more buyers into the market. It's more about the changing and when the need is to buy a house, which is typically in the spring. So with that said, I want to kind of recap on, what the market's doing. It's a confusing market right now for a lot of people. We're seeing, people, are used to just houses flying off the shelf. And we've been sitting at this for a couple of years, and it's just becoming more and more clear to me that, we're back to a more stabilized, normal market where, a house that checks all the boxes for most buyers, great condition, great location, and decent timing or priced well for the timing, they are flying off the shelves. We are seeing multiple offers still take place. We're seeing buyers compete for those houses. But houses that may not be the best location, may not or are not in the best condition, are not priced accordingly. Even if they are priced accordingly, they're sitting longer because people don't want to do the work. It takes the right buyer to come buy those properties. And sellers need to be more patient, and that's okay. It used to take, a year to sell a house sometimes. And, 3 months in this market is not drastically unheard of right now. And that's pretty, the average, again, days on market is only 29 days. So that's the average. Days on market is still a month. So it's still a, fast moving market. It's just not quite as, fast as it was. When we're used to going 1,000 miles per hour, when you're only going 200, now it feels slow. So that's kind of where I would say it's still a seller's market until this gets into like the 3-month range. Then I would say it's going to be a seller's market. So buyers, don't think you're getting a fire sale by any means, but there's still opportunities. There's still opportunities for buyers in areas that understand that the market's not moving 1,000 miles per hour, but take advantage of the idea that it's still not a fire sale. If I come in with a good offer and a fair price, I can get a good house. And that's where you got to be prepared. Sometimes I see buyers think they're going to get a fire sale. They come in 50K under the list price and they think they're going to get the house. And then another buyer sneaks in and gets it and they miss out. And so that's where you don't want to over leverage yourself, as this is an extreme buyer's market. We can take advantage of this situation. If you want the house, you need to be prepared to find a fair price and have a strategy on taking advantage of, a seller maybe that does need to move quicker, but not necessarily, coming in too low where you upset them and then they move on and or look for another buyer just because you came in too low, or spur other buyers. Sometimes we see buyers, there's this weird psychology of multiple offers with buyers because buyers are used to multiple offers. They hear the stories about, you don't have multiple offers. offers on every house. And then when you don't get multiple offers, you go look at a house and you're like, okay, there's no offers on the table. Well, why not? Why is there no offers? Um, Especially this time of year, it may just because there's, less buyers in the market. And just because there's no offers on the table, it doesn't mean it's not a good house. And so that's where you can take advantage of this. And, there's less competition out there right now, which means that you can get the house. And so there's this weird psychology that buyers, the multiple offer situation allows buyers to know that, hey, at least I'm not the only crazy one making an offer on this house. And they start guessing, second guessing if there's no other offers. And before you know it, you kind of wait, you think about it, and then somebody else comes in and makes an offer. And you miss out on the house, even though it would have been a perfect house for you. So just know that, if it is the perfect house for you and you're able to buy and willing to buy at that price point, I wouldn't recommend waiting in this market, but at the same time, there is opportunity to maybe negotiate on, some closing costs and not have to, get into a bidding war. And you're able to do negotiate or inspections, things like that, things that I think a lot of the buyers right now are kind of taking for granted in a sense of like, 3, 4 years ago, you may not have been able to do an inspection if you wanted the house. You may not have been able to ask for remedies if you wanted the house. You had to make an as is. You had to make an offer saying, hey, if the appraisal comes in low, we'll pay the difference. Those are things that were very scary and risky for a lot of buyers that you're not necessarily having to do right now. So I say all this and I'm kind of rambling right now, but just because, it's a market where it's a little bit more fair for both the seller and buyer. So happy to make a strategy for you if you want. Thanks for tuning in. If you're interested in learning more about creating a strategy, whether you're looking to buy or sell, that is the most important thing right now in this market, is to have a strategy. Love to sit down with you, create a strategy for you, or you just want to know, catch up on the market, please reach out. Happy to sit down with you as well and just continue to keep you informed of what's going on here in Columbus. Have a great day, and I will see you next time.